today, September 1st, 6:01 in the evening. Thank you guys for joining, coming in and logging in on early. Just wanted to get an early start. There is 22 slides to this presentation, and it is highly technical, so it might be a bit sleepy, but good information. This is a brand new presentation. There was one of the agents some probably about a year and a half ago, and actually I texted him today to tell him it was on, but he won't be able to make it. But he asked if I was recording it. He had asked me, Alex, do you have one on appraisal? And I said, no, I don't. Oddly enough, as a young skull full of mush, maybe 18, 19 years old, I got into appraisal, realizing that I just have a certain personality, and that is one of just doing research. I enjoyed doing research. I enjoyed helping people, and appraisal just seemed to be an obvious fit. Researching things and reporting on it just happens to be what appraisers do. And most of us recognize appraisers as being, that jerk that didn't bring the value in, right? But that's not an appraiser's job. An appraiser actually works for the lender, and the lender is hiring the appraiser to secure their collateral and their collateral piece, which ultimately is the money that they're putting up for a loan. And that loan is based on a secured collateral piece, which is the subject property. So they have to come up with a number to assess their risk factor. And so most of us would think that the appraiser works for the borrower, and they do. There is a component of ensuring the public trust, along with, it kind of goes along with the reason why appraisers even exist. So when I started putting this presentation together, I realized that there's really a lot to talk about. So I had to break it down a bit. I had to shorten it up, because there was a lot of stuff that me kind of looking into it and going through the process of coming up with a number on an appraisal report took a lot. But I had to focus really on, okay, what do real estate agents want to hear about, or what do they want to know? And the crux of what we'll be talking about will really be more in part 2 and part 3 of the presentation. Part 2 will have a little bit more based on comparables, and I actually have a demonstration on part 2. Part 3 will actually be a live demonstration on how to actually do it yourself on the MLS system, whether it be Realist, and also whether or not it will be on a CMA, which is on MLS, okay? And that will be part 3. So next week we'll cover, and like I said, I have a demonstration on comparables, but then the following week, 2 weeks from now, the middle of September, we'll do the live demonstration. So I wanted to just kind of touch base on that a bit, just because this is a brand new presentation. I just put it together a few months ago, and it was this was by request by some of you, and I hope you guys enjoy it. So let's get started. We're at 6:05. I just wanted to just do a quick start up here. There's my information. You guys have that. There's my little avatar. I meet you guys on my end, but feel free to chime in anytime. Like I always say, I really don't like doing a monologue. I would much rather be doing a dialogue with you guys. I'd rather be talking with you, and it actually helps others that are on the presentation to learn as well. So feel free to chime in if you have any questions. And I'm thinking that there's going to be some questions on this one, because, like I said before, it's highly technical. Okay, but you can also put your questions in the chat room. I'll try to get the questions to the questions after each slide, or I'll ask. But feel free to chime in. Okay, guys, don't be shy. Okay. Thank you guys for logging in early. It allowed us to get an early start, so we can not go into the evening too late. Try not to get too late. I try to end up by 7:30. I'm hoping that we end this one by 7:30. I hope that's the case. And as always, you guys are welcome to invite anybody There is no password on this Zoom meeting. You guys are welcome to invite anybody who's interested or you think might benefit from the information that we're sharing here, okay? So thank you guys for joining, okay? So any questions or comments so far? Anybody, any of you guys actually seen an appraisal or actually looked at one and tried to read it and understand it? All right, well, let's get started, okay? Quick overview, right? Today will be part one, and we'll be covering what an appraisal is, types of value, the definition of market value, which is the one that we use primarily for real estate, for refinances and purchases, market value versus market price. What does an appraiser do? Limiting conditions, meaning, you know, what things where appraisers are limited to exactly. And then there's part two, which will be next week, right? We'll do analysis, the inspection, comparables, and that's the demonstration that I was mentioning about comparables, and that will be very interesting. You guys don't miss that one because, man, when I was putting it together, I was excited about it because it really gets to the crux of a lot of the misconceptions that we have about comparables. Okay, and sorry about that. I'm logging some people in here. Certification, what the appraiser certifies. I certify that I'm going to use the best sales. I certify that I'm locationally, physically, size. I certify that these are the things that go on. And if you look at any appraisal that is done, there is a certification on it, and they actually sign it. Okay, licensing, obviously there's licensing in appraisal. Reporting, and there's a picture of it right there next to it. There's a one-page portion of a report, and then compliance, and that will be all next week. And then obviously part three, we'll be doing a live demonstration. I will actually show you how to do a BPO or broker price opinion on Realist, which, for lack of a better word, is simply just an analysis of a particular property, and then showing you how we come up with the number that comes up. And I apologize, I forgot to put my phone on mute here. Give me 1 second. And actually, it's somebody texting me that they can't make it today. Okay, so anyway, that said, any questions or comments on part one today that we'll be covering? So what's an appraisal, types of value, definition, market value? And I thought these things were important. Like I said, I could have made this a 6-part presentation. There was so much information, but I had to break it down mainly because you guys aren't trying to be appraisers, but you are trying to understand an appraisal. You're trying to understand where an appraiser is coming from and why they come to their conclusions. And I thought this would really shed some light on a lot of that. So this is where I was kind of excited about all this, because I get a lot of questions on this stuff, you know, pretty much daily. I get questions on all of these things, you know, and a lot of these things really do coincide with contractual things that are going on with the contracts in our purchase agreement. So, you know, the report is an appraisal report is an integral part of a purchase and or refinance. So, okay, so no questions or comments? All righty, so what is an appraisal? Let's go with the first one. So an appraisal is literally a report. The question is, of what? And also, what kind? Every report appraisal needs a subject. In most cases, it includes a property. So we understand that the subject of an appraisal is always the subject property. But in some cases, it can include a business or income-producing property, or even a partial interest, which what we're talking about here is the rights in real estate, okay? That's what an appraiser is appraising. Yes, he is analyzing the building, but at the end of the day, it's everything as a whole. And what we understand is the bundle of rights in real estate or rights in real estate. And the appraiser doesn't get too much into that because a lot of that is assumed to be correct. And we'll get into that when it comes to compliance, okay? So an appraisal report can be many different things based on the subject matter of interest. So we talked about the income producing property, and understand that an appraisal report is different for a single family residence than is, say, a duplex or a fourplex, right? Or or a quadruplex, right? It's a different appraisal form. So the appraisal form for an appraisal for a single family is a 1004, which is a Fannie Mae form, right? And it's a 1025 for a income producing property, whether it be 2, 3, or 4 units, or it's a 1003 if it's a condominium. So those are all different appraisal report forms, right? So an appraisal report can be many different things based on the subject matter of interest. But the analysis, opinions, and conclusions of those appraisals are roughly the same. The only thing that changes a lot of times is the rights and realty, right? So this is why the forms change, because they're reporting on different things. To make it easy, we'll use a single family residence in most of the examples today. Okay, so any questions or comments on that so far? So guys, just a quick little side note, because of my personality type of liking to research things and getting into appraisal, I was out in the field for roughly about 13, maybe 14 years doing appraisal and appraisal reports, and I became somewhat of an expert, mainly because of what I went into after that, which was review. And that actually gave me the opportunity to go and do all 50 states. So this is why I'm somewhat passionate about the subject matter, but also if I can shed some light on some things that are misconceptions for us as real estate agents, it will help you through your daily practices in terms of relying on appraisal and appraisers. Okay, so here are some examples of different kinds of value. Okay, so I didn't use this as an example. This is more of a demonstration, but anybody know of any different types of value? Because there's one that we pinpoint mainly when we want an appraisal, right? The definition of market value, there's one, but there's many different kinds of value. Any idea of what some other kinds of value could be?
Goodwill.
Goodwill. So would that be kind of like fire sale or maybe donation value?
Could be. It could be what the value of whatever's going on in appreciation in a name, historical value, all those kind of things.
So Karen said cost base, right? So let's see. Okay, so what it costs to build, right? What could be another different kind of value? Okay, so sale replacement value. Okay, yeah. So let's say it burns down. So typically that might be insurable value, the replacement value, right? Sully and Robert said income. So yeah, so you can base a value on income producing property, and we talked about that in the last slide. Okay, good job, guys. So value, right? So here's the definition: an amount as of goods, services, or money considered to be a fair and suitable equivalent for something else, a fair price or return. Monetary or material worth in usefulness or importance to the processor, utility or merit, right? So there's product value, service value, shared resource, subscription, resale, lease, agency, loan. And we've heard some of these before in our travels. Option, insurable, that's kind of like what Celia said, right? Cost base was probably product, right? What Karen was talking about. Capital, audience aggregation, and then there's the one that we like, market. Distressed, we're used to that word too. That's another one that we're familiar with. Okay, so any questions or comments on that? So the reason why I brought up the different types of value is that normally we try to focus on one, which is market value, right? So here's the definition of market value. The definition is one of many that exist. The particular definition is the one that is currently used on appraisal reports to pinpoint what kind of value is being sought after, usually for purposes of financing a home, right? I mean, that's like 99% of the time of our dealings. That's what an appraiser is doing. Occasionally, you'll see something called a feasibility study by an appraiser, and usually they're rating income, let's say on a business, right? That is also an appraisal, but it's not an appraiser that we're used to seeing, or appraisal report that we're used to seeing. We're used to seeing the appraisal report that is based on market value. Okay, so that's the definition that we're kind of that we are focusing on. Okay, so this is a snippet of an actual appraisal. So let me read this quickly because there's a lot here. Okay, the most probable price which a property should bring in a competitive and open market under all conditions requisite to a fair sale. The buyer and seller. Sorry, I forgot that there was some highlights in here. The buyer and seller each acting prudently, knowledgeably, and assuming the price is not affected by undue stimulus. Implicit in this definition is a consummation of a sale as a specified date and the passing of title from seller to buyer under conditions whereby buyer and seller are typically motivated, both parties are well informed or well advised, and each acting in what he or she considers his or her own best interest. A reasonable time is allowed for exposure in the open market. Payment is made in terms of cash, so in terms of dollars, right? The price represents the normal consideration for the property sold, unaffected by special or creative financing or sales concessions granted by anyone associated with the sale. So an appraiser has to think of all of these things that are going on when they're doing their analysis. So let's just kind of use this as an example. Okay, a lot of times, somebody will come to me and say, "Oh, the appraisal came in low, and I'm trying to come up with an additional 30,000 on this because they're doing a refinance on it. Can you help me out?" So I look at the appraisal and I'm looking at it, and the first things that I'm looking at obviously are where the comps located, are they similar in size, are they similar location, how far back did they sell, how far apart are they in sales price, are they close in sales price or are they far apart? Are the adjustments do they look arbitrary, or do they look accurate, or well analyzed? Those on the surface is normally what we think is just being reasonable, but what most people aren't looking at is whether or not there was some undue stimulus. And so this is the reason why I highlighted this. Okay, the reason why I highlighted it is because let's say that a sale in an area was a flip property. A lot of times flip properties will sell for a little bit more, or sometimes even a little bit less, just depending on the property, right? So you have to look, how does that property stand up to all the other ones that look like they sold normally? There was an occupant there for 7 years, and then they sold the property, and you're looking at all this information, but you're researching that stuff. So obviously, if there was a sale that the appraiser used in his analysis that had undue stimulus, well, guess what? He wasn't supposed to use it. Because in the definition of market value, right, the price is not affected by what? Undue stimulus. So there could be a lot of different things that could affect that. And guess what? Normally, when you're analyzing an area, those properties that have been affected by undue stimulus stick out like a sore thumb because they don't make any sense. We've all seen them. Everything is selling for 500,000, and there's this one that sold for 280. Well, obviously that one, like I said, it stuck out like a sore thumb. There's something wrong with that property. Why did it sell for 280 when everything else is selling for 500? Well, the same thing applies if there's one and everything sold for 500, but there's that one that sold for 700,000. And guess what? Realtors automatically say, or even homeowners, they say, oh, that one sold for 700,000. My house must be worth 700,000. Nope, not if it was affected by undue stimulus. See what I'm getting at there, guys? These are the things that I was hoping to bring to the table as a nugget in terms of being able to defend your position when you are doing your analysis in an area. This is the first nugget here on this presentation. The definition is on all 1 to 4 family Fannie Mae form appraisals. This definition here is on every single one of them. And this is the one that Fannie Mae uses and Freddie Mac. And it's done on the Fannie Mae Freddie Mac form, the 1004 appraisal, unless of course it's a 1025 one for income or 1003 for condos, right? Those forms all have this definition of market value on it. But understand, when we go back to the last slide, is that there are many different kinds of value, but those aren't the values we're going after. We're going after the market value, right? So any questions or comments on that? Man, we're barely on slide 6, and man, this is already getting thick. So let's do a pop quiz, okay, guys? Let's get some participation on this one, okay? In the previous slide, the word undue stimulus was used. What could be some things that can be considered undue stimulus? Anybody? Anybody? All right, let's start with the first one, okay? Overexposed. Anybody know what overexposed means? It's just another word for overpriced, right? So anybody, any other undue stimulus that we're familiar with? And as I start going through these, okay, so interest rates aren't necessarily an undue stimulus, Celia, because interest rates affect everyone. So an undue stimulus is something that is very specific to a particular property. So Ron, area, it wouldn't be an undue stimulus because again, it affects everybody. Okay, it would have to just affect 1, 2, or 3 properties differently than the majority of the properties. So long days on the market. Okay, so Sully and Robert, that was actually the first one. So overexposed, right? It's been exposed for a long period of time. And usually the situation is on that is it's because it's overpriced, right? When something's overpriced, it's going to sit on the market for a while. So let's move on to the next one, okay? Market crash is an undue stimulus. So not everybody's selling their property during a market crash, but some do. And so if some find themselves having to sell, those particular property are affected by undue stimulus, which is that market crash. But the people that didn't sell during that time obviously wouldn't be affected by it. Make sense? Underexposed. So there's that property where I was talking about, let's say the majority of homes in an area are selling for 500,000, but for some reason in your analysis, there's that 1 or 2 that sold for like 280. It's like, wow, why did those sell for so little bit? Those are underexposed properties. For some reason, they sold fairly quickly, and obviously they do not meet the definition of market value because they've been affected by undue stimulus. That makes sense? Environmental disasters, again, it kind of goes back to the whole market crash, kind of the same situation. There may be some that are affected by it and some that aren't, but the ones that were affected by undue stimulus. Condition. So, you know, you can have the majority of homes in an area are in all pretty good condition, but you have that one that is in really bad condition. Obviously, it's going to sell for a lot less than the majority of the homes in the area. Functional depreciation. So we all know what depreciation is, and I'll just kind of do a quick definition on that, although we'll probably cover it later on in this presentation. But depreciation is loss of value for any reason. So functional simply means that it is something that is usually uncurable, right? And you have loss of value for any reason, really. It could be anything. Political climate. So again, that has to do with just time. You know, if you sold during the time that the interest rates were high and people were getting foreclosed on and stuff like that, and you didn't sell, you wouldn't be affected by that, but some might. And in a political climate, a bad political climate, it could be very similar to the market crashing. That could also be undue stimulus, right? Stigma. The stigma that I was thinking about mainly, and a lot of you may be familiar with this, is that during the time of the market crash of like say 07, 08, even though people could still afford, or some people could still afford their payments, a lot of them just stopped paying. And it's just because there was a stigma in the market that they felt like, well, I'm paying $3,200 a month for my house, but the guy across the street is renting the same house for $2,500. So why should I keep making my payment? Well, that homeowner doesn't understand that, well, they agreed to pay, number one, but number two, it's going to affect their credit and potentially their ability to purchase a home in the future. But the stigma is that they kind of fall into a paradigm that, wow, if the market is paying so much less, why should I pay this? And so everybody was kind of pointing the finger at the lender saying, well, this is predatory lending, right? So that would be undue stimulus, right? And that's just to name a few. All right. So any questions or comments on that? So this kind of boils down to the last slide, okay? In terms of market value, when we're analyzing an area, we can't really use property that has undue stimulus as a comparable because it's not reflective of the current market. Now, understand that what I said earlier about appraisal report is performed for the use of the lender. This is in their formula for their risk factor of a collateral piece. Let me say that again. This is in their formula for the risk factor of their collateral piece, meaning that what they're saying is, Mr. Appraiser, we want a good number here on the appraisal, but we don't want you using properties as comparables that have undue stimulus. They're telling the appraiser that. That's their instruction. So if that's what they're doing, us as realtors and representing our client, whether it be buyer or seller or somebody that's doing a loan, we are actually obligated to point that out to an appraiser that you can't use that sale because of undue stimulus. Make sense? That's a nice little nugget there, guys. Right? I'm excited because these are the things that I use in rebuttal when I have agents and or homeowners ask me, Alex, can you help me with this appraisal? These are the things that I use against the appraisers, because I'll be honest with you, a lot of times when I point these things out to an appraiser and I'll do it in writing, they've never looked at it that way before. Oh my God, I've forgotten about that. That was like school 3 years ago or whatever the case was, but they play stupid, right? They play dumb. And a lot of times it's because they're so accustomed to going out, getting the comparables, slapping them on an appraisal and delivering it. They put the pictures in, they go through the process of doing it, and they're not really doing the research like they should be. And that's frustrating because we're paying these guys good money, right? To get it done. I mean, what does an appraisal cost now? Like $550, something like that. When I was doing it, it was like $350, right? Yeah, no problem, Ron. I mean, I'm recording this, so you'll be able to see these. I'm probably going to put the channel up right after I finish these 3 presentations, because I'll have probably 10 or 11, 12 maybe presentations up. So yeah, sorry you would have to leave, but because Ron, you're actually one of the gentlemen that loves to chime in. So like I said, I always like to have a dialogue. But yeah, no, I understand. It is what it is. Thanks for coming on. So let's do market value versus market price. Okay. So market price first. Let's look at the market price. The real estate market price is the amount that a willing and ready buyer will pay and what the seller will accept for a property. The market price is a bit simpler than the market value in that it is easier to set. Market price is mainly determined by the investment property's condition. The market price boils down to the amount the real estate property will sell for. So all things being equal, and let's just say that there's no lender and or appraiser involved in a transaction, the buyer and seller set the price of a property. It's called meeting of the minds. Meeting of the minds. That is market price. Okay. So can someone tell me what it's called when a buyer and seller agree? I just said it actually. Agree on a price, right? It's called meeting of the minds. I forgot I wrote that in, and I apologize. I actually put this presentation together like 3 months ago, so I apologize if I get ahead of myself. So market value, the market value of a property is the estimated amount or derived opinion of what the real estate property would sell for, taking all the available data into consideration. Another word for value here could be called worth. Okay, now, so what's the difference between value and price? Well, price is what a buyer and seller, meeting of the minds, has come up with in their minds in terms of what something is worth. Market value is now an analysis of the information in the area to arrive at a conclusion. And that's because, you know, an appraiser doesn't live in the area normally, right? A lot of times, you know, I would be called out, and I would live in Whittier, and I'd be called out to, say, do an appraisal out in Glendale. Well, I'm not familiar with the area. I'd have to do research. So me as an appraiser, I have to analyze that information in order to come up with a value, right? I'm not talking to a buyer and have a personal interest in the property as a seller to know what I think the property is worth. So market price is buyer and seller coming together. Market value is the analysis to come to that conclusion. Does that make sense, guys? So what are the things that determine an investment property's worth? Any idea? We say this, so somebody calls me and they say, Alex, can you take a look at the appraisal and maybe you can find some? What do you think the word is? Come on, guys. Everybody, I must hear this word every day for years, right? It's comps, right? What it can be compared to, right? So everybody says it, right? What are the things that determine an investment property's worth? And I say investment property, but it could be any property, because every property is an investment of some sort, right? But what determines its worth? Well, what it can be compared to, right? Or this is why we just kind of, our knee-jerk reaction is, what are the comps? And it's funny too, because I'll get people asking me about businesses, and I'll say, businesses are not based on comparable sales like houses, right? Businesses are based on their income. So it's totally different view on value, but you're still comparing things. So any questions or comments on that slide? So, well, Karen said size of the house. So yeah, you're comparing like to like. So in essence, yes, it's what you can be compared to. So size is one of those comparison criteria. So let's do a quick funny. So, and if it's real value you're looking for, this is our most popular model. Okay, that's hilarious. So look at Burger King value menu, right? Starting at $100. Oh man, that's too funny. Okay, so any questions or comments so far? All right. That chicken was too funny. All right, so where are we at here? So what do appraisers do? Okay, so this is kind of lengthy, so I'll try to summarize. Appraisers are investigators and reporters. Let's pinpoint what they're investigating exactly. Okay, locate the subject property, and that's what we should all be doing as real estate agents. We talked about this a little bit in the title class that we did, or title classes, about locating the subject property, because there's ways to cross-reference it. There's a lot block and tract will coincide with the assessor's parcel number, which is book, page, and parcel. And if you cross-reference those two things, you should end up in the same point. Okay. And then obviously there's a situs address, which isn't part of the legal description, believe it or not, but it's mainly used for the post office, is the address that we all look at, right? But we have to locate that property. So we're able to do it three ways that way. So you have the situs address, you have the lot, block, and tract, right? Or checks and balance, or meets and bounds. And then you have the assessor's parcel, which for tax purposes, book, page, and parcel. Okay. Physical aspects, or I'm sorry, physical inspect. And again, this is what appraisers do. they actually go out and they physically inspect it. And we'll talk a little bit as to why, right? Analyze the subject market area, obviously, and but there's that famous word again. They have to check out the comps, right? I kind of don't like that. I'll be honest with you. I laugh about it because everybody says it, but it's the most misused word in the appraisal process. Determine the subject's highest and best use, which there is a test. There are 4 tests that determine that. Correlate the data in report format. So, anytime you see an appraisal, the data is put into a form, and that makes it easy for the appraiser. But there is such thing as a narrative appraisal, which isn't a form report. The appraiser has to put it together like on a Word document, and that's pretty nuts. I've done some of those reports. It's painstaking, but that's why they're expensive, right? Report on the analysis, opinions, and conclusions. And I'll just kind of go off of this real quick because I've gotten into arguments with people when I was an appraiser, and they would sit there and say, Alex, appraisal, it's just your opinion. That's what they say, right? And I would tell them, no, it's not. It's not my opinion. It's my analysis, opinions, and conclusions, but it's not just my opinion. Not by itself, no way. There's no way that I can come up with a value with only my opinion. I need to analyze an area. I mentioned I live in Whittier, and I'm doing an appraisal of a single family in Glendale. I have to do an analysis, right? But in that analysis, I'm now using my opinion about whether or not I should use properties of, and we'll just use this example, undue stimulus. Guess what? I can't use any of those. And that's not necessarily my opinion. That's my professional analysis now, but I have to use my opinion in order to kick it out. My opinion is this property has undue stimulus, can't use it. So you're confusing the word opinion with, I'm just kind of shooting off the hip here and this is what I come up with, right? Versus my professional opinion on whether or not I should be using something. And then obviously arriving at a conclusion. So it's a correlation of analysis, opinions, and conclusions. So, man, I tell you what, I've gotten so many conversations about that one word, man, it drives me crazy. Report the limiting conditions. Oh yeah, so there's things that there's no way that I can know or report on because it is a limiting condition. Certify the report, conclusions, and credentials. So obviously, in every report, you see the E&O insurance, you see the licensing, and we're certifying that we are acting under these guidelines, right? And then, of course, deliver the report, right? So this is what appraisers do, right? And there's a lot to it. And once you get in the practice of doing it, it becomes a little bit easier. But starting off, man, it's overwhelming. Let me tell you. It takes 2 years of training with somebody else just to get to that point. But for the most part, once you get it down, it was a pretty lucrative. It was a good gig. It really was a good gig. Any questions or comments on what appraisers do? So let's start with the locating the subject property. Okay, so sounds simple enough. Just put the address in your Navi and drive, right? Well, in appraisal, it means something much more. In appraisal, you must locate the subject property in various ways. And I just talked about that. On a plat map, it's site address, assessor's parcel number. On a map, and it's a legal description. You must justify and cross-reference all of these sources to verify its legal identity. And I misspelled verify that. Because it is a collateral piece. You have to make sure you have the right property, right? So legally speaking, this is how we're identifying or locating the subject property. But then physically speaking means you physically go to the subject property and inspect it. Again, verifying is actual location on the face of the earth. And I don't say that lightly. A survey will actually locate a property within a thousandth of an inch. So because we're not doing a survey actually has already been done on the plat map. So they've already done some of the groundwork for us in terms of being able to locate the property. But we take a lot of this stuff for granted. And so this is why you should take a quick glance at what I mentioned before. Take a quick glance at the plat map, take a quick glance at the address, take a quick glance at the assessor's parcel number. And if you can cross-reference those things, usually you can do it within a few minutes, right? You could move on to the next thing because you can pretty much know that, yeah, you have the right property and this is the property that we're talking about, right? We don't have to do a survey on that to make sure. But these are the limiting conditions that we're talking about. So any questions or comments on locating the subject property? All right, moving on. On slide 11, we're at 641, so we're moving kind of swiftly here. So let's keep going here. Physical inspection, right? So an appraiser needs to rate and inspect various areas of the home and for different reasons, right? Let's delve into why. Verify the subject property existence. So here's an example of what's called a facade, okay? Lenders have been duped because a false appraiser goes out, takes a picture of the front of this and says, oh yeah, this is physically there, but if you look behind it, it's not, right? It's a facade, kind of like a movie set, right? Measure size of the improvements, right? So Karen had mentioned the size of the house. And so why are we measuring the size of the improvement? Well, because we're going to compare it to others in the area. So we use it as a basis of comparison, right? Measure setbacks. We want to know that the orientation of the house is on the property because an easement or encroachment, and we've talked about that in the title class, an easement or encroachment may affect the value of the property. Again, now there's potential undue stimulus. So we're checking the setbacks, making sure that where the orientation of the home is. And I used to measure setbacks. I'd go from the fence to the back of the house, from the side of the house to the front, and I would have setbacks drawn in on my sketch. I rarely see that on appraisals. Rate functional layout design. So what are we talking about? The house has to flow properly. Most of our homes flow property. You walk into the front door and you're in the living room, right? I've walked into a front door and it was a kitchen, and that's very, very dysfunctional, right? You walk into a bedroom, right? And then you have something called a tandem bedroom where you have to walk through a bedroom to get to another bedroom, which be considered functional depreciation, right? You have loss of value because you have tandem bedrooms. But the functional layout design of the property affects the value of the property. So what is an appraiser doing? He's checking the layout of the property because it can affect the value. Rate fenestration. Anybody know what fenestration is? Fenestration is proper placement of doors and windows. So if you ever walked into a bedroom and there's no windows, or as in the case of the tandem bedrooms, you know, the other bedroom in the back doesn't have an entry door. You have to walk through another door to get to it, right? Rate condition and depreciation, or the physical aspect of the property. So there's a nice little picture of a almost fallen over home. So, you know, if an appraiser walks up to that, do you think that there's any value there? Probably not. It's probably a total loss because it's about to fall over, right? And that has to do with health and safety. So what is an appraiser doing when he's physically inspecting the property? Well, he's checking that out. He's making sure that it's not going to fall over, right? So that goes over to the health and safety part, which actually is every appraiser's job. Health and safety, if there's ever any broken windows, if there's anything that looks like it might not be built to code or built in a workmanlike manner, right? Appraiser will call it out. That's why they're physically inspecting the property. Does that make sense? Right? They're not just going out measuring and taking pictures, right? These are the things that they're looking for, and they're obligated to report on to a lender. So now, kind of stepping back a bit, us as realtors, you know, how can we change some of these things? Well, if you know an appraiser is going out, you want to make sure you have the smoke detectors up, carbon monoxide detectors, because you know those are required. I mean, it's right on the purchase contract. And then you also want to make sure there's no broken glass. You want to make sure that the house has water heater straps on position, you know, on each third of the water heater. And it also has to be, if it's in a garage, it has to be off the floor. And it also has to be vented over the roof line if it's outside 18 inches. So these are all health and safety factors. So as realtors, you can tell your client, if they're the seller, hey, you know what, we need to get this fixed before an appraiser comes out because they're going to call it out. And a lot of us have experienced that. But these are the things that an appraiser physically inspects on a property for these reasons. They all affect value. And when they're actually putting this information on a form, this is what ultimately why they're making adjustments against the comparables in the area. And we all see those adjustments on the form. Well, this is how they come up with that. So any questions or comments on that? Interesting stuff, huh? Analyze the subject's market area. And this is the part that everybody loves, right? There are many things that comprise a market area, like they say in real estate, location, location, location. And quite frankly, that's true. In appraisal, is much to consider about where your subject property is located, right? So we talked about orientation, right? Where the property is located, and oriented, meaning like where it's, which way it's facing. And a lot of us have heard about feng shui, and there is some truth to that, to feng shui. That's not just, like a superstition, it's not a fairy tale, right? There is some truth to that. I had a Chinese client one time, and the mom came with us, real sweet lady, and she was telling the son, we don't like this house because it was on a T lot, meaning that the headlights, when the car is coming down, the headlights hit the house, and that was like against their feng shui criteria, right? And so they didn't like the house for that reason, which I'll be honest with you, the mom made sense. Well, what if the car just keeps going? You run right into the house. Well, that makes sense to me. So it's not just feng shui, it's also common sense, right? But the orientation of the home, and that's just simply just an example, could affect a property. So these are things that an appraiser is rating. Okay, the neighborhood. Okay, so neighborhoods have stages, right? They're in a construction stage. They're in a state of kind of like plateaued. The area is kind of plateaued. There is like a depreciation stage, or the area just kind of loses its luster. And then there's a renaissance stage, which is considered to be more like a rebuilding stage, like things are starting to get nicer in the area. But obviously, you're not going to use comparable sales in an area that's in the state of renaissance versus an area that is in the decline, because now you're not comparing like to like. So now it's not just about the houses that you're choosing, it's also about the neighborhood. So it gets a little deeper than just, and this is why I say comparables, it's no longer comparable, so you can't call it that. And this is why I don't like the word comps, because what people are only looking at when it comes to comps is the price. They're not looking at any of this other stuff. And guess what? Appraisers are looking at all of these things, right? Nearby adversities, whether it be a flood channel, could be a storage yard, it could be even a commercial building or a strip mall, right? So these are things that all externally affect a market area. Regression and progression. Now, this is a little bit more convoluted, but I'll use this as an example. Okay, so regression. Okay, regression is when you have let's say you have a house that's 1,000 square feet in an area. Okay, and the majority of the homes around it are 2,500 square feet. So what's happening is that property, that's progression, okay? That property is being affected by all of the properties around it, because all the properties are bigger. It is being affected by progression, which means that it's being pulled up, okay? Yeah, so say they mentioned train tracks. So train tracks would be an external adversity, but it's not the tracks, it's the train, because I've done an analysis of homes that were near a train track, but the track was voided, meaning it wasn't being used anymore. So it's actually the train that is the external influence. But back to regression and progression. So if you have a house now, let's say that's 3,000 square feet, and the majority of the homes in the area are 1,500 square feet, it's being pulled down or regressed, or regression, right? Is being pulled down by the rest of the properties because now you have loss of value. So it's regression. That 3,000 square foot house is not going to recoup its value because everything around it is smaller. So again, if we're trying to pull comps from a 3,000 square foot house that is in a 1,500 square foot area, and I'm just talking on average, that house value is going to be pulled down through the concept of regression, right? And obviously it's going to make the homeowner upset because, oh, they spent all this money on this property. Well, you did it in the wrong area. So we're back to location, location, location. Does that make sense? Most similar and current information. So obviously, you know, we shouldn't be using comparable sales that are, let's say, 12 months old. We want to use things that are 3 months old or 2 months old if possible, or even 1 month. But the guidelines state that we can go back as far as 6 months if we have to. But obviously the most current information is the best information, because the closer you get to the current date, the more accurate the conclusion. And that's true about samples as well. The larger the sample, the better the conclusion. Utility and facility, sidewalks, street. So let's see. I have seen up to 1 year back comps. Yeah, which if you have to go back a year, you can, but that's only if there's nothing newer. Because if you are not using the information that is most similar, you are in violation of the appraiser certification. And I'll show you that. I think that'll be next week's presentation. But again, now, if you're using something that's a year back, it makes it look like the appraiser is deliberately trying to go back and use that sale in order to arrive at a conclusion. And that's not his job. His job is not to hit a number. His job is to come up with the number. See the difference? So utility and facility, right? So we've all been to homes, like if you've been out in Hesperia or Victorville, we've all seen the homes that don't have sidewalks or streetlights. It takes a while, maybe a short drive to get to a park or even stores. So these market areas are very, very unique, because the majority of areas that we're used to have these facilities and this utility, right? So obviously you're not going to use a home that has these facilities and potentially try and compare that market area now to one that doesn't. So these are things that you know that we were looking at. Municipal. So you're obviously not going to use a comp that's in Brea when you're doing a Fullerton appraisal. Properties in Fullerton can't use Brea comps, and that's because the majority of the time it's because of the school district. Now, sometimes they're the same school district, but there are other factors, and we're talking about just the fact that if you think of Brea, you automatically think more expensive than Fullerton. Or let's say Brea versus Placentia. Anybody that's ever been to Placentia knows that some of those areas are almost ghetto. But if you're going to Brea, you know, it's a little bit more affluent. So you're not going to use Placentia comps in a Brea property. Does that make sense? So, you know, we're analyzing the market. Any questions or comments on that? So highest and best use, I'll go through this real quick because this is a little bit more technical. And quite frankly, this is something that we wouldn't, as real estate agents, normally even look at. But have I come across properties that do not meet these tests? Yes, I have. Very, very few, but I have seen it. So in appraisal, there are 4 tests that must be met by a property to qualify for its highest and best use. If a property does not qualify, usually it does not have any value, meaning that the value is usually 0. Okay, here are the 4 tests. If the use physically possible, or is the use physically possible? That means that topography, soil type and conditions, lot size and shape, surface and subsurface water, and even weather patterns must make the development possible, right? So if you can't build in an area, or is that area physically possible? Like you can't build on a slope, or you can, but it's going to be, it might be too much of a pitch to be able to build. Then there is no value. You can't have value in it, right? Is the use legally permissible? Meaning that if I were to apply for permits to build this, will they approve those plans, right? The proposed use must be allowed by zoning regulation, right? Financially feasible, right? A property is financially feasible if the NPV is greater than 0. And that's net property value, by the way, NPV is greater than 0. And then maximally productive, okay? The purpose used with highest and best internal rate of return and net present value is the maximally productive use. So again, this is a little bit more technical. I don't want to get into this too much, so I'll just kind of keep moving. But is there any questions on this? These are the 4 tests that appraisers use. Now, the majority of the time, like I said, you're going to find that the property is already physically there. It's already legally permissible because there's permits on it. There's already been financing on it, so it's financially feasible, and its maximum productivity, right, has already been established. It's already been established. So most of these tests is just kind of like just a quick kind of look at that. Okay, yeah, it looks good, and then you kind of move on, right? So any questions or comments on that? Okay, moving on. Let's go to correlate the data in a report format. So Fannie Mae has designed a form to attempt to guide the reader in the process we have been speaking of. They have put the columns in level of importance. So this is where it really starts to come together in terms of when we use the word comparable, okay? So just to give you an idea, Fannie Mae has put these columns in the level of importance. What's the very first one? City. The very first one is the address of the property. Where's it located? That is the most important criteria when doing an analysis and trying to come to a conclusion. So if you have an appraiser that is going out of the area to do something, guess what? They've already violated the very first and top criteria that has been designed by Fannie Mae on the form. That's by design, right? And so if you look at the next one, it says proximity to the subject. So now they want to know, okay, well, you're in the city of Ontario, but how far are you from the subject property? Well, guess what? In this analysis here, you see 0.85, 0.45, 0.68. It's all within a mile. Now, this is where it gets interesting. The next item of comparison is not size, it's not bedroom count, it's not lot size, it's not when it's sold, it's not, any of the other stuff that's underneath, not even age. The next thing is the price. And everybody asks, well, how do you compare price? Well, we talked about undue stimulus, right? The price is in any sample. When you pull a sample, let's say you have 20 comparables in an area, okay? You have something that happens in statistics, and it's called the bell curve, okay? 68% of your sample is gonna fall within your predominant range. So you're gonna have 16% on either side of your sample. 16% is gonna be high, 16% is gonna be low. Obviously, you can't use the high and lows because they're usually being affected by undue stimulus, kind of like what we talked about earlier. But the majority of your bell curve, so now you have a bell, the majority of your bell curve, so let's say that you have 3 comps on either side, high and low, so you're kicking those out. So out of 20, you have 14 left, you have 14 comps. The majority of those comps are gonna fall usually pretty close in price. Does that make sense? So that's why it is being compared here on the Fannie Mae form. These prices should be close together. So 505, 515, those are pretty close, but where did this 465 come from? So there should be another reason why that one sold for 465. And I would venture to say that if I were to look in this area, I probably would find one more at 500,000. So why is the appraiser using this one at 465? It's not a very good comp. And this is where it comes into now my opinion. I can base my opinion on that bell curve because now we're using statistics to come up with my opinion. So it's not just my opinion, right? I'm not just shooting off the hip. No, I'm saying that 465 kind of doesn't fit this analysis. Now, maybe there wasn't anything else, so I had to use it. That could be another reason. But now I'm going to adjust for different things as I see fit. So guys, when you're looking at an appraisal, all of you that are in this presentation right now, and anybody that watches it in the future, right, are now going to say, oh my God, you know what? I kind of didn't even know that. I'm always looking at bedroom count and lot size and square footage for my comparables, right? Now, we're all looking at price, but we're usually looking at what? Probably the other side of the bell curve. We're looking at the higher sales, and actually that's what the sellers are doing. And guess who else is doing that? Zillow. Zillow's looking at all the higher sales too. And that's why usually the Zestimate is about 20%, 15 to 20% higher than an actual appraised value. Because Zillow, it wasn't market price or market value. Zillow is what you call a correlation of information. So you have a correlation of all the information, you're going to have a false sample or a false conclusion. That's just analytics, right? That is just analytics in terms of the rules of analyzing, the rules of predominancy, mean, median, mode. Zillow doesn't use those factors. So this is why their numbers are skewed, okay? But the idea of the form is of level of importance, and you'll find that square footage doesn't even come until the middle. You know, they'd rather look at condition, age, quality of construction, design, the land size, and then obviously, you know, a little bit higher up, you have when it's sold, because that's important. That's very important, right? But I wanted to cover those things because it kind of gives you more of a vision as to what you're looking at. So if you're looking at it like, oh wow, you know, I never knew that this was a level of importance. Well, it is. And if you look at it that way, you start to see mistakes as you go down farther and farther, possible mistakes. But you might have another sale that you plug in here and you say, oh, look at, I have one at 500,000. It's a little bit farther, maybe it's 0.95, but it's still within a mile. And it's sold, let's say it's sold in November, just like this one. And it's also 1,200 square feet. This one's 1,150. So I found a more similar and more current sale that meets the criteria of my certification. I'm certifying that I'm using the most similar and most current sales, right? I'm not just picking this comp just because I found it in the area. There's a reason for me using this. So now what's happening is that I'm arriving at a value. I'm not looking for a value. See the difference? Any questions or comments on that? That was a big nugget there, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed that one. So report the analysis, opinions, and conclusions. So in a nutshell, this is the report as a whole. An appraiser filters through all the data and picks the most relevant to the assignment. That's the opinion part. An appraiser chooses the most similar and current information available, and the value is the residual effect. In other words, you're arriving at a value, right? You're not trying to pinpoint a value and then kind of massaging it into place. That's not what appraisers do. Well, they're not supposed to anyway. Value is not the opinion of the appraiser. It is a correlation of the data and its outcome, hence the conclusion. The report has the format, sketches, photos, plat maps, addenda, etc., all correlating the data and proving a point in time. Because a value of a property can literally change within weeks just based on what's being sold around it. So any questions or comments on that one? Well, what's happening here? So limiting conditions, okay? Because no one person knows everything. Well, even professionally trained appraisers, it would stand to reason that there would be conditions that may sway a conclusion, sometimes limiting its accuracy. These are actually listed on every appraisal and the appraisal certification. Matters of legal nature. Sketch is approximate. Relays on Fannie Mae flood information, or relies on Fannie Mae flood information. So I got a question here. So when we try to see comps, we should not focus on square footage, right? Instead, close value sales. Okay, so actually you're gonna be looking at both. Okay, what you're looking for when you're looking for comparable sales, and I'll just use the word sales because that's what they are, they're just sales. But when we're comparing them now to the subject property, there are a lot of factors that we're looking at. But mainly, if you look at the appraisal form, they're in level of importance. So obviously location is first, when it's sold, the lot size, and then it gets to bedroom, bathroom count, and then it gets to square footage. But the thing is that all of these things, you want to be able to say that, you know, if you, let's say you have a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house and it's 2,000 square feet. It would, in a perfect world, you would like to have within, let's say, half a mile, and they all sold last month, all 2,000 square foot comps and all 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, and they're all 8,000 square feet, just like the subject. That would be a perfect world. So think of it like that. So any variation of that, okay, you want to just remain as close as possible. But again, it's the value that comes out of that, because what you're doing is you're picking the most similar comps. You're not even looking at the price really, other than the fact that if it looks like it's out of whack of everything else, you're just not going to use it, right? That's undue stimulus. But now you're plugging in all these other factors. What comes out of it? Well, they're all going to have a sales price, and it's a correlation of those sales prices. So it's the residual effect. Your conclusion is the residual effect of that analysis. I don't want to oversimplify the fact that we shouldn't be focusing on square footage, because that is a factor of comparison, if not one of the main ones. Because obviously, let's say you have a 1,500 square foot house, just because you have a sale that's 2,000 square feet, when you have 1,500 square foot comps, you shouldn't be using the 2,000 square foot house. So that is part of your opinion in terms of when you're using a sale as a comparison. So I hope I answered your question. The limiting conditions is the appraiser will not testify in court. No knowledge of hidden conditions, obviously, and that's all of us, right? We all have that disclaimer. Subject to satisfactory repairs, and there may be some health and safety issues that come up, and we're saying, okay, yeah, it's worth this as long as you strap the water heater, put the smoke detectors up, and fix that broken glass. So Sally, okay, so you have another question. How can we know the adjustments, such fireplace, how many bathrooms? Is any way to know how much is the value of an additional bathroom? And okay, so obviously, like I said, if you're in a perfect world and you have all 3-bedroom bathroom comps, there's no reason for an adjustment, because what we're talking about is utility. 2 bedrooms compared to 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms compared to 2 bathrooms. So there's no reason for an adjustment, okay? But what if you have a 3-bedroom, 1-bath home, and you have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home, okay? But the 3-bedroom, 2-bath home sold for $490, and the 3-bedroom, 1-bath home sold for $495. Did that additional bathroom have any effect on the value or the meeting of the minds? And we talked about buyer and seller coming together and having a meeting of the minds. If the 3-bedroom, 2-bath home sold for less than the 3-bedroom, 1-bath home, there is no market effect, hence there is no adjustment. So it really is based on the analysis that you're doing in the area. Now, that doesn't normally happen. Usually a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home will sell for a little bit more than a 3-bedroom, 1-bath home. So let's say it's the reverse. The 3-bedroom, 2-bath home sold for $495. The 3-bedroom, 1-bath home sold for $490. All other things being equal, what's the adjustment? It's $5,000 because it sold for $5,000 more. So it's really based on what we call market reactions. That's how all adjustments are based. You have to be able to justify your adjustment. You're simply just not shooting off the hip and saying, oh yeah, I arbitrarily just kind of give $5,000 for all of these things. You can't do that. You have to be able to support your adjustments. Now, we're getting into and delving into an appraisal question that's a little bit more in depth. And I understand why you're asking, but quite frankly, you really would have to get into a really deep analysis in order to be able to prove that. So it's not something that us as realtors normally get into. But to answer your question, the adjustment is based on market reactions. So I hope that answered your question. So I was talking about subject to satisfactory repairs. Satisfactory repairs, and I mentioned the water heater straps, broken glass, possibly maybe a hole in the ground. I've seen that before, right? So these are things that what they're saying is that this value conclusion is subject to these repairs. And once these repairs are done, then the value is okay. But if they're not done, then this value is no good. Because now you have what's called cost to cure, which the appraiser is not being hired to rate. And then they're certifying that there may have been a trainee that actually went out to be their eyes and ears, maybe take pictures, measure, that kind of thing. But they have to report on the fact that they used a trainee. And this is just to name a few. So these are limiting conditions now that appraisers can confront, but these are things that are actually in the report, and they have to tell you as a reader of the report that some of these things actually limited my analysis, because I could work for a month on an analysis and still not be done with everything that could be analyzed. We're trying to shorten up time. I mean, we're always in a rush to get our appraisal. Well, the appraisers are doing their best, and as you can see, there's a lot to do on an appraisal. So any questions or comments on limiting conditions? So let's move on to them certifying the report and the conclusions. So please know that it is illegal to report an appraisal conclusion on a federally related transaction, meaning the loan, okay, without a license, especially if it is performed on a Fannie Mae form. So that's actually a different crime. So there are two crimes here that we're talking about, because the Fannie Mae form now is a legal document, okay? The Federal Institution Reform and Recovery Enforcement Act, or FREA, of 1989 does not allow the use of appraisal to be used in an uninformed or deceiving manner. The appraiser must certify in the report his or her state credentials and endorsement. Lenders further require appraisers to carry E&O insurance for errors and omissions. So how do BPOs and CMAs relate to this subject? Anybody know how realtors can get away with doing a BPO or CMA? Anybody? So there were two clues here, and one of them is that on a BPO, you're not using the Fannie Mae form, okay? And you're also not coming up with a conclusion. It's more, you're just kind of showing the data. Now you do put like a correlated number down, but you're not calling it market value, okay? You're calling it a broker price opinion, or a BPO. You're calling it a BPO. And a CMA, a comparative market analysis. You're not calling it the definition of market value. That's not on any of the paperwork. It's not on any definitions anywhere. It's not even in the name of your conclusion. The name of my conclusion is my broker price opinion or my comparative market analysis, right? So those are the two reasons why a realtor can do such an analysis, okay, and not be federally prosecuted for doing an appraisal, because that's not what that is. So that's how you can pretty much get away with the same thing. Now, granted, you're probably looking at the same information, but the difference is that you're correlating it differently than an appraiser is. Realtors are not looking at all the things we just discussed. They're not looking at functional layout design. They're not looking at health and safety. Most of the time, they're not even inspecting the property, right? So that's the difference. But an appraiser, licensed appraiser, has to certify and have credentials on an appraisal, and that is through federal law. That's FERIA. Any questions or comments on that? So now I believe we're getting closer to the end. We're on slide 19, which I think is one of the last slides. And we're actually doing good on time. So we're 7:17. The question that seems to come up often is, who is the owner of the appraisal report? Okay, man, this is good, because I get this question so often, and this is something that is confusing to a lot of people, but I'm going to tell you how it is. Okay, so the answer: the person who orders the appraisal is the owner of the report, and that's usually the lender. Borrowers do not usually order appraisals directly from an appraiser, mainly because right now the process is that you order them from what's called an appraisal management company, and they randomly choose an appraiser, and that's all part of what was called HVCC, which is Home Value Code of Conduct, but that doesn't exist anymore. But some of the lenders still use that process, and the idea is that you can't influence the appraiser because there's a disconnect. You're not talking to them directly. But to answer the question, who owns the appraisal? Who owns it? Most people think, oh, it's whoever paid for it. No, they have a right to a copy of it. As a matter of fact, I think that's the next part. The argument I always hear is, isn't it the person who pays for it? Actually, the person paying for an appraisal has a right to a copy. So the question of ownership of an appraisal comes up if the lender is changed. So let's use this scenario. Let's say that Mr. Borrower goes to Chase and he applies for a loan, and they order the appraisal. The loan officer says, okay, I need your credit card information so I can pay for the appraisal, right? So let's say that they get the appraisal, but somewhere along the line, Mr. Borrower says, you know what, Mr. Chase, I don't like your rates. I'm going to go to Wells Fargo, right? Can he take that appraisal with him over to Wells Fargo? And the answer is no. The answer is no. He can't, because who owns the appraisal? Chase owns the appraisal. Only they can actually tell the appraiser if they want to release the appraisal to Wells Fargo. And I'm using those banks as an example because you can visualize it a lot easier, right? And I think I talk about it here as well. So actually the person paying for the appraisal has a right to a copy, meaning that they're getting a copy of it, but they can't just take it over to Wells Fargo because it's a copy, right? What Wells Fargo wants is the original. And it actually, looking at appraisal, it actually has the lender's name on it. So who owns it? Well, Chase does, okay? So the question of ownership on an appraisal comes up if the lender is changed, Chase to Wells Fargo. The lender has the option not to release the use of the report to another lender. They can say no. They can say, no, we're not releasing it. If you want to go to Wells Fargo, you got to get another appraisal done by Wells Fargo. I know that is not, a lot of people say, no, you're crazy, you know what you're talking about. And then I said, okay, well then take it over there. Take it over to see if they accept it. They won't accept it. It has somebody else's name on it. Concerning the delivery of the report is usually always delivered to the lender using electronic methods. The report conclusions are usually still scrutinized by most lenders' own review department and underwriting. And what does that mean? That means that when they get the appraisal, they're still going to look at it. Usually they have an in-house reviewer. somebody like myself that's sitting there looking at appraisals, and they're looking at all the different lines that we looked at on page 2 of the report, which was the comparables, but they're reviewing it. It's another set of eyes. And I'll be honest with you, the majority of the time when I look at appraisals, I find mistakes on them pretty quickly. Now, I have a trained eye for that because I was doing like 25 reviews a day for 7 years. You know, you become accustomed to it, but you can imagine the guys that are still doing it, they're good at it. And I've known a lot of them. I was on a floor of 90 review appraisers at one point when I was with Argent. And there was a lot of smart, sharp individuals, and very impressive, very impressive. Finding mistakes on these appraisals constantly. I would find them constantly. I would say out of the 25 reviews that I would do in a day, there was 10 of them easily that I would kick back to the appraiser and say, you need to correct this. This is a mistake. This is the wrong address, because I'm verifying the information. That's what I was doing. So understand that the lenders are scrutinizing those same reports in their review departments, and then it gets to underwriting, and that's another set of eyes that looks at it. And we've all seen underwriting conditions, you know, appraiser to provide additional comp, appraiser to provide permits on covered patio, which is actually a violation, by the way. Lenders can ask appraisers for permits, and I'll get into that next week. But they can ask the homeowners, can ask the appraiser. Appraiser is not responsible for matters of legal nature. We'll get into that. Any questions or comments on report delivery? And who owns the appraisal? No arguments on that? I'll tell you what, I have that conversation at least once a week, because there's a borrower that wants to change lenders. There is, you know, arguments back and forth as to, you know, oh, I paid this, you know, how come I don't get a copy? You know, I really do think that the lender should be a little bit more clear on the fact that this exists. But quite frankly, and you know, some of us, you know, are deal with loans out there. We don't expect the borrowers to go somewhere else, you know, but that's not what we're thinking when we're doing all of this. So, you know, you don't think about telling them up front, but quite frankly, we should have that conversation with them. A lot of times lenders even use that to try and keep the client. They're saying, well, no, we're not going to release the appraisal, that belongs to the lender. So a lot of times you end up losing a client because of it, which is not good. So anyway, it's better to have the knowledge, and you know, you can work your magic in order to try and keep the client, potentially keep them happy. Maybe you lose out on this one, but maybe you keep them on the next one, or maybe get a referral because you were nice about it. Just something to think about. But for the most part, I wanted to drop this little nugget here of information, because this is how it is. Any questions or comments on that? None. Okay. So final thoughts. Okay, so appraisal is certainly not an easy subject matter. I think even for me, it is overwhelming to think of all the things you must know and do just to get a value conclusion. And I'll be honest with you, when I made this presentation, it was a lot thicker than it was. When I went back and looked at it, I had to start pulling stuff out because there was way too much stuff. It was way too much stuff. And really stuff that was unnecessary, mainly because I'm not trying to teach you guys to be appraisers. What I'm trying to show you guys is what they're doing, how they're doing it, and really how to combat some of the things that they're supposed to be doing. Because I'll be honest with you, you're going to look at an appraisal and you're going to say, oh, there's a mistake here, and you can potentially fix a deal that you're working on. Normally, people will call me to do that. So I'm hoping that some of that rubbed off on you guys. So I have to wonder, though, if appraisal was a simpler process, would we as consumers take a position to scrutinize it? I think that is the reason why it is so involved, because consumers and business owners alike need a more specific and scientific and specific conclusion. There's been attempts at creating an appraisal robot. They are known as automated value models, or AVMs, and we're familiar with those. Guess what? Zillow is an AVM. It's an automated value model, or for lack of a better word, it's a robot. we're all familiar with this estimate, which in my opinion is roughly 20% inaccurate the majority of the time. These attempts have certainly misled consumers. So the need for appraisers, in my opinion, will not go away soon, nor the need for accuracy when it comes to value. The current system of appraisal seems to be the method of choice to secure collateral with the least amount of investor loss. And that's the reason why appraisers are still around versus the automated version. Until, of course, something better comes along, which it might. Technology has definitely evolved us recently when it comes to phones, computers. Technology has become, it has shaped our current political and sociological environment. So you can imagine if an appraisal robot becomes a little bit more accurate, how much tighter things will be. But we just haven't realized how or why yet, right? Do I think that it could happen? Yeah, I mean, I was working as an appraiser when a time when AVMs were just a thought, but now they exist, right? So any questions or comments on that? Excuse me. I did the animation backwards on the final thoughts. So anyway, let's go on to affiliates and resources. Here's my information, you guys. I know that a lot of you call me during the week for advice, you know, for finding solutions, that kind of thing. I'm always here available. Just remember me when you close a deal, right? That I helped you get there. So I have mouths to feed as well, and it's always nice to kind of share in the wealth. So I'm not asking for much. There's Larry's information. Oh yeah, Larry's here. Here's phone number, email address. He is our title representative. Fully endorse his product. Matter of fact, some of the offices that I work with, Larry services, and they're happy with the service. So there is a good resource for other things. So give him a call, find out what he can do for you. He'll be more than happy to help. Celia, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I think it was a great class. I spent a lot of time putting it together, taking a lot of stuff out. Like I said before, there was a lot of stuff that I took out mainly because I really didn't think you guys needed to know. Because again, I'm not trying to teach you guys how to be appraisers, but I am trying to show you guys what to look for. Right? You're welcome, Karen. And I'm glad you guys were able to make it on today. The questions were good. And like I mentioned before, I am recording these classes. Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, Robert Sully. This is a new one. So so you guys haven't seen it before, but this is a new presentation. So this is the very first time that it's been presented, and now it's going to be on the channel, on the YouTube channel when I put it up. So there's Liz's information. If you guys need a loan approval and or need loan advice, so to speak, there's her information. She's more than happy to help here at Uptown Realtors and ERES, which is Executive Real Estate Solutions. So there is the Saturday class that I always mention with Mr. David Plummer. I highly endorse his product in terms of his real estate coaching. You know, I do the technical stuff. Dave does the motivational stuff. You know, I do sometimes have, and we have done some of the motivational stuff, but I'll be honest with you, I cannot reach his level. It's just not my forte. My forte is more technical, and it really does a service to some of his clients and or students that come out of my class. I know that Ron, he had to leave, and then Leon is another gentleman that also frequents Dave's classes that comes on here with us a lot because they're looking for that technical piece. But in real estate, guys, we all know and understand, excuse me, that we need the motivational piece as well. What's going to get us out there marketing ourselves, right? And Dave helps you with that. So if you want to take a picture of that, he does it every Saturday, 8:15 to 9:45. There's a meeting ID and password. He'll be more than happy to have you guys. So That class is free, although he does do a week coaching during the week that he does, but that's more one-on-one, but that does cost money. So just so you know, it can evolve into something bigger and better. But using a motivational coach along with myself, the tactical piece of it, you become well-rounded in your choice of career, which is real estate. And that's what we try to focus on. So take that into consideration. And then in your travels, I do endorse property ID, which is natural hazard disclosure report that is required on every transaction. Typically, the sellers order it, and it is typically ordered through escrow, but not all the time. But there's her information. If you have any questions about NHD, you're welcome to give her a call, and she'd be happy to help. Other than that, any other questions or comments? We are at the end of our first time appraisal presentation. We are at 7:32, which we actually did a good time at 22 slides, which is pretty good. This one's highly technical. My throat is starting to get a little raspy, a lot of talking, but I'll tell you, I'm very passionate about this subject matter, and you'll see next week is even better. So if you guys know other people that have gotten on with us before, tell them not to miss it because it's going to be good. Next week, I'm going to show you guys a little demonstration on comparables. And I know we talked a little bit about that today and some of the concepts that we're using in market analysis when we're looking at markets, but this one's going to be totally different because it has to do with how we're choosing the comparable sales. And it took me a lot of time to put it together, right? But once it was done, oh man, I loved it. I was like, this is a perfect illustration of how I can combat somebody who's arguing with me about what we should use. And it sticks out like a sore thumb. So it's good stuff. So anyway, this was part 1 of 3. The third presentation, which would be 2 weeks from now, is going to be a live demonstration on how to put together a broker price opinion on the MLS system. And I'm going to be using CRMLS, not the MLS or not South Bay. I'm going to be using CRMLS. And I'm going to show you guys how to do a broker price opinion on the Realist system. And then I'm going to show you guys how to do comp search or comparative market analysis or CMA on the MLS system using active listings, pendings, and solds that show up on the MLS system. Now, the MLS system is less reliable because that information is being inputted by agents. And the majority of the time when you look, you'll find that maybe 50% of the time it's a few days off, or maybe it's a few numbers off, but usually it's pretty close. So that's where they probably should call it more of an estimate. But at the end of the day, I'm going to show you guys how to do that. So you can do it yourself. It's really easy actually. And then you can show your clients. Now, there is another thing that you can do on your system, on your CRMLS system, and that is the same comparative market analysis, but you can do it as a listing presentation. And that's actually, I want to make into a separate class because it's got all its own things, even though it's very similar to doing a CMA that you might just be doing just to come up with a value conclusion. Let's say you're doing a listing or something. But the idea is to know how to get close to arriving at a value and why. And a lot of what we talked about today had to do with that, because now you're going to start looking at whether there's undue stimulus. Now you're going to start looking at the time something closed, or the bedroom bathroom count, or the size of a home. Because again, you're looking for most similar, most current. It's pretty simple. Most similar, most current. If you deviate from that, you have to have a reason why. And so does an appraiser. So a lot of us say, well, it came up with a lower value. No, he didn't. That was the residual effect of the sales in the area. And remember, it's market value, but your buyer and your seller may have come to a different conclusion. And some of them are actually relying on the appraisal in order to do that. And that's why we have an appraisal contingency. Well, if it doesn't make value, the buyer has an option to try and renegotiate with the seller. And if the seller is not willing to renegotiate, here's the option to cancel. We don't like that word, but it's the truth. So anyway, that said, any other questions or comments? You guys want to unmute and chime in, or are we done for the night? All right, well, guys, thanks for coming down. Jose, good seeing you. Robert Sully, good seeing you guys. Larry, good seeing you. Celia, always good to see you. Hopefully you see something soon. Mr. Larry, what's happening? You're on mute. You're muted, my friend.
Just saying hi.
Oh, okay, yeah. Hi,
good presentation. You can tell you know your subject, so good to hear.
Man, imagine if I wouldn't have shortened it up, because it probably would have turned out to be more like 6 presentations.
Yeah.
But I pulled a lot out. I really did. And you know, it's just because it's one of those things where I know so much because it was always in practice, right? It was always every day, just this is what we're doing. This is, you know, so it's not like I'm some, you know, guru or something. It is.
Well, you did it, what, 20 years?
Probably cumulatively a total of 20 years, but
yeah. Okay.
Now just, you know, when being an agent, there was also a lot of that knowledge that flowed over to, you know, when we do BPOs and CMAs. So I was still doing all of that stuff, right? So, and still am. I still am.
Well, I had appraisal class that I took through Cerritos. Was an interesting class, and I will say there's a lot that needs to be considered, which typically they don't give you the credit for doing as appraisers. So, but that's life. So what? It's like, okay, tell me what work everybody does that you have the credit that you need. It's kind of, it's in the background, it's there, and people really don't understand it. So it's good to hear. I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah, and the way I actually started this presentation, I actually started it with the history of appraisal. But then I realized that, you know what, that's not important. What's important is a little bit more what we talked about today. So I took it out. So that was one of the things. But if I could just touch on that really quick, because I know Robert, Sully, and Jose are still here. When we talk about, okay, good night, guys. When we talk about the history of appraisal, what happens is that you have people that now point the finger and say, you know what, you were just coming up with a value, and they're pointing the finger. So now you have this element of distrust, and that element of distrust exists with real estate agents.
Yes.
For that reason. So now you have to have a different level of education and a different level of science that you have to use, and that's appraisal. That's why it's a totally separate industry and part of the real estate industry, and totally separate credentials. And the idea of that was to ensure the public trust. Yeah. So, you know, I say all this because I'm recording it, and anybody who listens to it will be able to hear all this stuff. But for the most part, I took that part out, the history of appraisal, because, you know, you remember, Larry, appraisal used to be 2 pages.
Yep.
We used to paste the pictures on the picture pages, right? I remember those. I used to do that. You know, I had my glue sticks, and you know, I used to paste appraisals, and I used to deliver the appraisals by hand. You know, I would walk.
Now you're showing your age.
And that was nice, man. Appraisals are like 30 pages now.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of like the contracts, and it's because you're always going to have those who scrutinize of what's happening. And even now, I'm finding mistakes on appraisals because there's just so much to know and report on that it becomes difficult to become proficient as an appraiser.
Yeah. We lost a lot of good people after the 06. They wanted to blame the appraisers when the downturn happened.
And well, it wasn't just the downturn, but it was the change in regulation, because, you know, coming in, Obama had to make a decision. You know, he had to make a decision. He had at that time, we had the mortgage meltdown, and it was about, man, it's about damage control now. What do we do? Well, one of the things that was being fought after and sought after in the appraisal industry was a disconnect between the people who were ordering the appraisals and their ability to influence those appraisers. So they created what's called the HVCC, which is Home Value Code of Conduct, and that was the disconnect. The problem is that they included these appraisal management companies that were taking a good part of the fee right?
Yep.
And then
Yep.
it dumbed down the industry because appraisers are saying, you know what? I was making $350, $400 before, and now you want to give me 200? I'm out of
Yeah.
here. I'm not doing this anymore.
Yep.
And you lost a lot of good appraisers because of that.
Yeah. And now in a appraisal, what would a narrative appraisal run?
Oh, well, now you're looking at commercial appraisals, typically
Yeah.
feasibility studies. Usually they're in the thousands.
Well, thousands, and then how many pages are they?
Well, it depends on the project, but I've seen them as much as 200 pages.
Oh
Um,
boy. Okay.
it takes a month and a half to get them.
Okay.
Typically, that's what you would find a feasibility study or an appraisal like that on a commercial building.
Yeah.
Maybe 10-story building or a laundromat or, some kind of business where there's also a lease analysis. And there are other things going on. So it's not just comparable sales. It's not just income producing. It's not just income analysis. You're creating rates, right? Cap rates, where you're analyzing cap rates and then you're comparing them or correlating them, right? But a lot of it is based on analytics,
Okay.
right? And statistics. And so you have to be able to put all that on paper, and it's a lot. It's a lot.
Sure.
I've seen them as maybe as short as 25 pages, which that's probably a smaller project. They probably charge something like that, maybe $700, $800, and probably takes them a couple weeks to do.
Yeah.
So typically, what I would find is the amount of time that it's taking them. They're usually charging $600, $700, $800 a week just to get to that point. So if it takes a
Wow.
month and a
Okay.
half to get it, you're paying a couple $1,000s, right, for that report.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Just figured that way I'm aware. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where you have to find a commercial appraiser, and there is a designation for licensing for commercial appraisers. It's called the AG or certified general, right?
Okay. See.
So in the front of their license, if you see AG, that means they can do any kind of appraisal. But if you see AR, or what was the other one? So that's certified residential, and then AL is just like a single family guy. It's just a license. AL is just licensed.
Okay.
But AR is certified residential, which he can do 1 to 4s. I think anything under $1 million, something like that. And then after that, you have to use a certified general, which is an AG.
Okay.
So anyway, that said, good seeing you guys.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
I'm going
Very
to sign
knowledgeable.
off. The next two presentations are going to be really good. So
Excellent.
invite those who you think can benefit. All right,
Shall
guys.
do.
All right.
Thank you.
Signing off.
Bye.
All right. See you then.